I titled this video, The Awfulness of Franklin Graham in a Single Tweet. Well, that's probably overselling it a little, but I do want to use a single tweet posted by Franklin Graham 2 days ago to illustrate some of the reasons I find him to be a deeply offensive person and a profoundly problematic representative for evangelical Christianity. So, posted on December 10th, 2020, he writes, "This Human Rights Day, I'm thankful I live in a country where we have had the right to freely exercise our Christian beliefs up to now. We've been able to go to church, pray, read the Bible, and proclaim its truths to others. But this could change dramatically in the next few years." Of course, to many Christians, and certainly to Graham's supporters, this will seem like a good tweet, a wholly inoffensive one, where it's just celebrating religious freedom. But note first, there is no mention here of the freedoms of anyone in terms of human rights except for Christians. And I think that's deeply revealing that time and again, we see that Franklin Graham's interests are in particular with Christians. So for example, back in 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq under the false pretense of weapons of mass destruction, Graham was one of the biggest cheerleaders of this invasion because he said it would provide a new opportunity to bring the gospel to Iraq. Think about that. More than 100,000 civilians died in Iraq as a result of that invasion and the effects and impact it had on the economy. It also cost $3 trillion, by the way, according to Joseph Stiglitz. But we could be thankful for it, Graham says, because that shock and awe campaign provided an opportunity for evangelists, Christian evangelists, to come in its wake. Imagine that in reverse, right? If a Muslim country invaded the United States and Muslim evangelists were praising that opportunity to bring the Muslim gospel to the United States, how horrific Franklin Graham would find that action. That's just an example of the kind of gross hypocrisy of this man. So then he says here at the end, well, this could change dramatically in the next few years. And so, of course, that's his way of casting shade upon a Joseph Biden presidency. Despite the fact that Joseph Biden is himself a deeply committed, pious, lifelong Catholic, his Christianity doesn't matter to Franklin Graham. Instead, Franklin Graham, of course, supports Donald Trump, who is one of the most profoundly unchristian individuals ever to hold public office in the United States. Graham, however, says, well, but Trump has cared about human rights, right? Has he? Let's take a look here. Here is the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. And this is their list of the Trump administration's human rights and civil rights rollbacks since January of 2017. And it starts, among other things, with the Muslim ban, which discriminated against Muslims and banned refugees. And it goes on from there. Now, I was going to talk about some of the most egregious highlights of this. And the thing is that there's just too much to talk about. So let me just recount from memory a few of the ways that I find Donald Trump deeply offensive when it comes to human rights. Remember last June 2020, when he showed up at a church in Washington, D.C., but first he used soldiers to clear out peaceful protesters using pepper balls. And once he'd cleared them out, he came and did a photo op in front of the church without the consent of the clergy of the church, and he held a Bible upside down in the photo op. That's a tin pot dictator, right? That's not somebody who cares about human rights. Remember, one of the hallmarks of the Trump administration is their attempt to terrorize refugee claimants who are coming in from the southern border by adopting a policy of separating parents from their small children, including infants. And even as I speak now, I believe it's over 600 children have still not been reunited with their parents as a result of Trump and Jeff Sessions' policy of separating children from their parents. Can you imagine being separated from your 6-month-old infant 3 years ago and still not being reunited with that child and not knowing where that child was, and knowing that that separation occurred simply as a way to deter future refugee claimants on the southern border? That is horrifying. That is, frankly, a demonic policy. Now, the head of the government of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, I believe his name is, he's known as MBS. A couple years ago, he had, and this all came out after the fact, that there was a journalist who lived in Washington, D.C. and had become a U.S. citizen, but was originally Saudi Arabian, and who has been a tireless critic of the human rights record of Saudi Arabia. He was arrested by secret police, Saudi secret police in, I believe it was Turkey, and then he was tortured and dismembered with a bone saw. The Trump administration refused to speak out against Mohammed bin Salman. In fact, Trump maintains a close friendship with MBS and wanted to close a major arms deal with MBS in Saudi Arabia. And then there's the case of China, right? China, who have forcibly detained more than 1 million Uyghurs at re-education camps in Western China to align this ethnic group with Chinese communist nationalist ideology. Trump has been utterly silent on that slowly unfolding horrific cultural genocide. Trump has repeatedly praised dictators around the world, people like Putin, who has a history of murdering journalists, never critiqued Putin on those actions, never critiqued Putin and his goons on poisoning a person on British soil, which happened a couple of years ago. Some of the other examples, the president of Philippines, Trump has repeatedly praised him. Again, he's has a long history of egregious human rights abuses. Trump has praised Mohammed bin Salman and, as I said, Putin, and head of China and Turkey, has praised the idea of maintaining office for life. And now, of course, we see that Trump is currently attempting to overturn a democratic election. So we could go on and on, but Trump is no friend of human rights. And of course, we should also note that in the last few weeks of his presidency now, he's accelerating executions. And of course, for people who find executions themselves to be ethically, morally problematic, that's just more cyanide-laced icing on this egregious human rights violation cake. I'll put it this way, there are no millionaires on death row, right? The only people on death row are the people who can't afford better defenses. Of course, Trump cares nothing about that. So Trump is no friend of human rights. And there we come to the end of the list of egregious human rights abuses gathered by the Leadership Conference of Civil and Human Rights. So when I look at this tweet, what I find is Franklin Graham, somebody who doesn't care about human rights generally, he cares about the rights of his special interest group. And he's also grossly partisan, he's hypocritical. And he's aligned himself with one of the most profoundly anti-Christian politicians ever to hold public office. So in a nutshell, that's why I find Franklin Graham so profoundly offensive. And it's all from a single tweet.